And now the fun part. Step 3 is to put in all the upper voices with smooth voice leading and make sure we're resolving our tendency tones correctly and avoiding parallel fifths and octaves and all the rules. So I'm just going to go through one chord at a time. What I'd like to do is just make sure that as I do this, that I spell all of the chords completely and correctly, getting all the notes in there that need to get in there. So what I'm going to do as I spell this second chord is I'll just cross out the notes that I already have on there. I already have the bass on there, so I'll just cross that out. Okay, now I'm going to look for smooth voice leading to these other notes. So if I just start with my tenor, looking here at the tenor, he's on an A. He could go smoothly to a B. He could also go fairly smoothly to an F. Okay, so I'm just looking at the possibilities here. My alto could come down to the D sharp, or possibly go up to the F, and the soprano could go to a B or a D sharp. Now, here's where I'm going to run into problems. If I take my soprano up to this D sharp, that's well, it's not really a problem. She could do that, but it's a larger step for her than it is for the alto to get to the D sharp. So I might consider that, take the alto to the D sharp, and then that would leave my tenor on the F and my soprano on the B. Or we could do soprano, D sharp, alto, F, tenor, B. That gets all of them also. So either way, you want to choose that. It's up to you. You decide. As Bob Ross would say, you decide. Okay, I'm deciding to come down with all of my notes because anytime I have an accidental, especially a sharp accidental, I like to come to it with the lowest, the smallest interval possible, just in case maybe that D sharp in the soprano would cause an augmented second. It doesn't in this case, but I avoid those augmented seconds if I can come into the accidental from the smallest interval possible. Okay, so let's continue on. In this next chord, I need to make sure that I resolve my seventh down, my chordal seventh down, and my secondary leading tone, the leading tone we have temporarily in this key we're functioning in, key of E, that needs to go up. So I'm going to take my D sharp up in my alto part, and I'm going to take my A that's in the bass down, which they already did for us by writing the Roman numerals that they wrote. That's why that 5 is in first inversion. Okay, so then the other two notes, okay, so I've got my E taken care of. The other two notes should be on a G and a B if I want to double the bass. So B is the common tone in the soprano, and tenor can double the bass on the G. Next chord. I should probably have a leading tone of the key in this chord since it's a 5 chord. I'm watching out in this whole exercise for these G's. Anytime I have a G, it needs to go up. Okay, so I've got a G in the bass again is the tendency tone, and it does go up. They were nice enough to give us that in the Roman numeral. And then I've also got a G in the tenor. Uh-oh, what did I do there? I doubled the leading tone. That was bad news. So as I'm going through this and saying, oh, I need to resolve my leading tones, then I do that, I'll notice that I would have parallel octaves. So what I have to do then, when I find that out, oh, got to go back and change the previous chord. So the best solution I can see for avoiding that is to double the soprano on the B. And I'm getting a consecutive leaps there in the tenor. Not the worst thing. They won't actually dock you points for that. You just want to try to keep things really conjunct. If you have excessive leaps in all the upper voices, then they will actually dock you. But so far, we're mostly stepwise, just that tenor has to leap a little bit to avoid that doubling the leading tone, which is a worse offense. So going on here, we resolved the leading tone in the bass there. Want to keep any common tones if we can, so that's the altos on the E. Then I'm going to probably bring the tenor down to the A to double the bass, and then my soprano up. Okay, since those were doubled, we could have done the opposite, the tenor going up, the soprano coming down. Either way would have worked just fine. What kind of parallel motion do I have here? The bass with the soprano. That is a third, so we are safe. Okay, so you always want to check your parallel motion. Every chord you spell, go back and check the parallel motion coming into that chord. And make sure that it's not fifths or octaves. Thirds and sixths are great. Fourths are okay also, but no fifths, no octaves. And the next chord, any common tones there? Yeah, the tenor can just stay right on that A there. And that's the chordal seventh, so I'm going to make sure he goes down in the next chord. Let's see, I need a B and an F. So if these just come down in parallel sixths, nope, that would be a B, and I need to go up with the alto, sorry. Now I've got no parallel motion in those chords. So I've got the F and the B. The A needs to come down in the next chord. And there is no leading tone in this chord. In a 2-7, there's not a leading tone. So I don't have to worry about resolving a leading tone. Let's just make everything else as smooth as it can be. So I've got a E and a G already there. I need a B and a D. So B can be the same. And then if I put my alto on the D, nothing too extreme there. No parallel motion there either. So now on this one, the D needs to come down, the leading tone G needs to go up. And I'm noticing right now that I've got a 5-7 going to 1, both in root position. When this happens, one of these chords needs to be incomplete. So either I could have left the B out of this chord, this B here out of the 5-7, or since I already did that and it was just a common tone with the soprano, I can just leave that as it is and leave out the E in my root position tonic triad. So let's just see what happens when I resolve my tendency tones correctly. So D coming down to C in the alto, and my G going up to A in the tenor. So if I were to say, well, I really want my soprano to sing that E and complete my chord, let me just show you what happens. Okay, it's going to be a little bit sticky here. Okay, well, first of all, that if I do it that way, I end up with a spacing error right there. So maybe I wouldn't even do that. I would go down to this whoa, that's an eraser. I would go down to this lower E here, and then the tenor was on the A leading tone. Okay, what happens here is I've got the bass jumping down a fifth, soprano jumping down a fifth, and those were, let's see, I had an E, G, B, parallel fifths. Okay, so E to B is a fifth, and then that A to E is a fifth. Okay, so this is why we have to leave one of these incomplete. We're always going to end up with these parallel fifths or some sort of problem if we try to complete both triads, or both chords, the seventh chord going to the triad. Okay, so what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to leave that E out of the chord altogether, resolve my tendency tones correctly again, and I'm just going to put that soprano on the root of the chord, triple the root, and have the third in there, leave out the fifth. It gives us nice smooth voice leading. I've got parallel sixths going on here, that's great. And there you go. You're allowed to leave out the fifth of the chord, not allowed to leave out the third or the root. Okay, obviously the root is the chord, names the chord, and the third gives it the flavor if it's the minor or major chord. The fifth you can get away with leaving out sometimes. So there's step 3 for you. The step 4 would just be to go back through, make sure that all of each voice stays within its range, that we don't have excessive leaps going on in the upper voices. Check to make sure that all of your leading tones resolved correctly. Anytime you see a G sharp anywhere in this whole thing, you should make sure that it resolves correctly. I don't see any G sharps in this treble clef, but maybe here on the bass clef. Okay, so there's a G sharp. We need to make sure it goes up. Check your chordal sevenths. So anytime down here that you have a chord with 4 notes, make sure that the 4th note of that is coming down. Okay. The A comes down, which I've got so many lines here now you can't even tell what I'm talking about. The D on this one needs to come down. And hopefully we did all this as we were voice leading it, but you just want to double check. Make sure there's no voice crossings that will often happen in your tenor and alto part, but I don't really have very high tenor or very low alto, so we're pretty safe there as long as they're on the staff. Alto comes down here, but the tenor's on the staff there, so we're okay. Any other rules that you might think about? Spacing, if your soprano got way up here sometime, then that would be a problem. And just make sure that you followed all the rules for as much time as you have. I mean, remember the suggested time for this is 10 minutes. If you're doing this on the exam, they give you 45 minutes to do 3 different questions, and one of them is 15 and one of them is 20, and this one's 10. So if you've got a couple minutes left in that time that you're allotting yourself, then, go check those things. If not, just call it good and move on. So please reach out to me with any questions, email, call. Good luck and have fun.